we'll cover CloverDX 5.12, which we proudly announced or released this Tuesday, so it's already available for download. And today I'm going to go through a couple of major features which we added into the product, and also we'll have a little demo to show those features in action. So let's get started. We are currently in September when we released 5.12. The next release is planned for December this year. It's going to be 5.13. We are currently in stage of researching of a couple of new features which we planned for the release, and there's really a lot to look out for. So for 5.12, what are the highlights? I think the most visible feature you may find out in CloverDX Designer outline is OAuth2 connection support. Basically, with 5.12, you should be able to connect to any OAuth2 secured endpoint. We are rolling out with a couple of pre-configured endpoints, but that could be extended quite easily. What we are rolling out with, I'm going to talk about on the next slide, actually. So let's take a look at Data Apps Catalog organization. Basically, we got a lot of feedback on larger data apps catalogs and how it's hard to search what you're looking for, which is why we added a filter into the catalog, and also we enabled categorization based on sandbox names or custom categories which you can assign in CloverDX Designer when you're actually creating a data app. Also, we added a functionality where you can add an icon, custom icon to your data app, so you don't have to rely on those generic ones which are generated for you. In last release, we introduced Job Inspector, which we kind of extended this release as well. I think the most wished for feature was a data inspector into Job Inspector, which allows you to browse data as they're flowing through your transformations, as if you would be in Designer environments. Also, we added a view where you can open parameters and browse parameters which are included in the job, which is currently in Job Inspector. And we enabled parallelization or visualization of parallel features of Clover. Also, we did extend REST API. So now you have basically 3 new options, which how you can utilize REST APIs, but I'll get to that a bit later. Of course, you can get 2 full release notes on this address. I think these slides are available after the webinar, so you can click on a link or navigate directly from your support portal. So a little bit deeper on OAuth2 connector. Basically, you can create any OAuth2 connection, as I mentioned from outline. We are launching with predefined configurations for 5 providers at the beginning. So we will support out of the box any basically Microsoft service. If that's going to be Azure or Office 365, it will still work because they're using essentially the same mechanism. We will support Google applications, Google services, also Facebook, LinkedIn, and GitHub. Essentially, how these differ is essentially with links to documentation and URLs, which are pre-configured in the dialog. We'll see that later in the demo. Also, we introduced generic driver, which you can configure pretty much any way you want, which allows you to connect to services like maybe HubSpot or other ones which are not listed, which are not in this like launch pre-configured providers. Then in data app catalog, I already mentioned that you will have customizable icons, which you can define in Designer. You can search, you can enable or disable descriptions, which are searchable as well. So this search is really full text. If you provide some more advanced or more verbose description for data services, those will be searched too. So basically, this way you can allow your users to find the data app you developed more easily than without this the description or proper name or proper category. With Job Inspector, there are actually some improvements which I did not mention. One of which being the ability to run a job directly from Job Inspector. It's actually more powerful than it was before in Sandbox's view, where now you can define parameters and you can rerun job from Data Inspector directly. You don't have to go through executions history dialog. You can really use Job Inspector to do it for you. Also, I mentioned that we added some clustering features to Job Inspector. That's depicted on the right-hand side with those purple components and multiple entries on edges when you have a small job. Another improvement already mentioned, you have parameters view where you can see both internal and external parameters. We added a data inspector. That's the right bottom part of the window, and of course we added some more things like small things, visuals, colors. And it should be a better, more pleasant view on Job Inspector. There's another feature which was added. You can open Job Inspector in new browser tab, so you don't have to look at it in that small view in sandboxes or execution history. You can really open it full screen, so you have the more space to visualize what you're looking for. Extending on our topic of JSONs and variants and how they relate to each other, we extended a support for JSON format in data services. Now with that input pillar which you have in REST jobs and output pillar which you have in REST jobs, you can deserialize and serialize JSON documents to and from variants, which makes it quite easy to define a data service which works essentially on Exchange side with JSON format. We'll see that in the demo later. I do have a small project prepared, so you can actually see what is going on and how to work with such data service. Now there's some notice. We dropped support with JBoss Enterprise Application Platform 7.1. We still support 7.2, so if you are on 7.1, upgrade before you upgrade Clover. Otherwise, you'll be on unsupported platform. And another small notice for 5.13, we plan to drop support for Apache Tonka 8.5 and Pivotal TC Server 3.2. Pivotal was purchased by VMware, and they do have currently VMware TC server 4.1, which is currently supported. So till next release, you have basically time to upgrade to 4.1 if you are running on this TC server. Another quite important update is deprecation of component called RunGraph. If you have a standard license, you probably used RunGraph to run pretty much any other graph from OneGraph. It is now moved to deprecated category, and we strongly encourage to use execute graph component instead, because it's more stable, it's easier to use, and you will not get a read timeout when your jobs are running long. So be mindful of that. RunGraph is still going to work. It's still in the product. It wasn't removed, but if you use it, plan to switch to execute graph, which is currently supported and in production grade. Now, other improvements I promised at the very beginning that I'll mention a couple of REST APIs which we added. So first one is basically changing existing one. With executions, you will now have access to relationships, meaning you can refer to executions parent and children directly from this API as a response from the server. We added new endpoints to install or update a server license, which should come in handy when you have some headless deployments, when you use Terraform or other tools to deploy your infrastructure. So this call may be helpful if you need to install a license basically on an automated fashion. There are other ways how to do it, but we added this one just to support exactly these scenarios where you use tools like Terraform. Another addition to REST API is the ability to download, replace, or update sandbox contents. There are basically a single endpoint using a different HTTP methods. This is basically to mirror the same functionality which was or still is in a simple HTTP API, which is currently in maintenance mode, and we will not be adding new functionality into simple HTTP API. So if you are using this endpoint or these endpoints currently, then we encourage you to switch to more modern and currently maintained and extended REST API. There are some other nice additions to the product. So for instance, with data intersection, you don't have to define all 3 output ports, just one is fine. If that one is not the merge one, then you don't even have to define transformation. So I think that's a good news for everyone doing something like slowly changing dimension algorithm and similar use cases where you need to compare 2 data streams together and collect basically the result out of it. HTTP connector now supports SAH256 or OAuth2 signature. This is quite important for anyone who's on NetSuite, who uses NetSuite, because they deprecated SHA1 signatures, and with new versions of NetSuite, you would not be able to connect to their APIs. So that's why we basically added SHA256 signature into OAuth1. Also, we identified a connection leakage with Oracle Database Driver, which was introduced in previous version. So we fixed that. So it should, the update should prevent this leakage from happening. Talk quite a bit. So let's take a look at how it looks like in real life. I'm going to open my designer, Jboss Designer. And first, let's take a look on OAuth2. So OAuth2, you can see and define, as mentioned, in connections. I already have 2 connections ready. I'm using Microsoft's Office 365 connection, and I'm using Google BigQuery service to basically take data from Microsoft Cloud, from Office spreadsheet, and then I'm putting whatever I read into Google BigQuery. How it looks like when you create a connection, basically same procedure as you would have with any database connection. You will be prompted in which configuration file you'd like to create your connection. This one cannot be internal, given how OAuth actually works. So I'm gonna just call it sample. Then you define provider. Those are the ones we come out of the box. So if you specify Azure or Facebook, you may notice slight difference because actually Azure uses also tenant ID to identify as another identifier to client ID, but that's pretty much the only provider which differs in its interface. GitHub and all the others only have these client ID, client secret, and scopes. Nice addition is when you actually select provider, you may notice there is a link in here. If you click on this link, you will get to Google or Azure or any other documentation where you can find those scopes those providers provide you with. Also, providers differ in addition to this link in which APIs or endpoints are used in here. So if I switch from Google to Facebook, it will change the target URLs. If I have a generic one, I will not have these 2 pre-filled, and you actually need to check the documentation of your provider and just copy paste those URLs in here. But otherwise, it will work exactly the same. When you specify these information, just click authorize, and the procedure basically begins. It's exactly the same one as you're probably used to from your mobile phones. When you are authenticating against OAuth2, you'll get through login page of your provider to an approval page, and then you'll be reverted back to CloverDX server, which is maybe another point which I probably should have made at the very beginning. To make OAuth2 connectivity going to be available, you actually need to be on a server project, which I already am. So I'm currently connected to the server. If I would, in here, if I would like to authorize against my Google BigQuery, I'll just click authorize, provide my login information, because I would need to provide my 2-factor. I'm not going to go through the whole process, but essentially when I click next, I will get prompted on my password, 2-factor authentication, and then I'll get to approval pages. You might have seen on the gift in slides. So I'm not going to go through that. I'll just show you maybe from my server actually what we did with Job Inspector. So looking at Server Console, I can go into my sandboxes and OAuth2 connectivity. I have this Azure and Google BigQuery graph. I can switch to Job Inspector, from which I can run my graph directly. So I click RunGraph, can provide those 2 variables. Okay, I'll just copy paste from here. All right. And run query table. It's my Excel spreadsheet location, and the query table is in here. So running it, basically give me an error. Of course, we are on a webinar. So essentially, what should have happened is I should have been able to run this transformation. I'll just try to do it from and just look at execution history. What was going on? Probably didn't specify something. All right. So in Data Inspector, I'll just open it in a new tab so we can actually see it bigger. There are these information about my cluster. So this one is actually running 2 times parallel these 2 components, and then I'm joining back. So that's new addition. If we would look at the other feature on data service side, so I have a small data service in here. Okay. In freights, I do have update vehicle information. So this endpoint, what it's doing, essentially, it's reading a vehicle database where I have some information. I'll just probably revert back my database, so I can actually show you things updating. So I have my vehicle database in here, and what I'm expecting on this API is to get a JSON object, which will merge with my current database data, update those data, and then save it back to my database and return the full record to my data service, right, as a JSON output. How it looks like or how it's built, it's pretty straightforward. I do have a format JSON set up in here on my data service input. I also have a JSON serialization on my output. I'm basically pushing just a variant field. My body is a variant, right? And this component over here does all the magic. So essentially, what I'm doing is I'm trying to merge this information. So it's basically going on in here, trying to match those records. If I update something, I create an audit that I have changed key from one value to another, and letting know my users this is actually happening. So let's see what's the input and output. I prepared, brilliant. I prepared a script which uploads a file into my endpoint. Data in demo. Data in demo. This script is nothing like too special. It's just a curl command with some information, pointer to a JSON file, which I'll be uploading. Right, so it's this is actually identifier of my car, and I'll be updating address, city, postal code, latitude, and longitude. So let's update it. Brilliant. Let's do this then. I promise this was working just before webinar. All right. So I got my response. These are the fields which were updated with previous values, right, as promised. And I get also another information from my file. Actually, I wanted to show you, yeah, right, it's in here. So I updated address, which is now updated to proper value. The previous one was here. And what we can do, we can open Data Inspector in Job Inspector to actually see what was going on in the whole process. So I have my API in here. And what I can do is just open Data Inspector to see which data were processed at which point. You will also see or notice that I have loaded 100 records in here. If I would scroll down, it would get loaded more and more, as you're probably used to from Designer. When you scroll to the very bottom, the next set of records are being loaded. So we save some computing power and memory when you don't need the full data set. Okay, so that would be Data Inspector, data services. And maybe the last stop I wanted to share with you is the data catalog, the data apps catalog. So let's take a look. All right, so we have data services. By the way, this was addition way back. You can show and hide this menu in here. I don't know if too many people know about this, but I'm using it all the time just to save some space for my main view over here. So let's take a look at data catalog. We have a bunch of services in here, or data apps. So as promised, I can search through. I can enable or disable compact view. It gets enabled automatically when I have a hit in the description. So if I would have a hit in description, I will automatically show these as well, so people actually know by which information they found the data app. Also, we can switch between category and sandbox, right? So all of my data apps are actually in the same sandbox, so this is not as nice as it would be in real environments. But I can group by category, which is defined uniquely for each of my data apps. How am I doing that? It's pretty simple. If we switch back to our data apps, for instance, if we look at the lorry planning, I have in endpoint configuration, I have category freight, which I can either select one of the existing ones, or I can create my own category, which is now going to be reflected in data app catalog, right? So I have my new MISC category in here. So that would be a demo. Hopefully you liked it. And yeah, thank you. And see you on the next webinar.